Welcome again, everyone, to day 2 of Gateways to the Impossible. And I will relish hearing from you about the potential of another iteration, a continuation of this program. So I am grateful to each one of you, those who are physically here in this Zoom room and those listening, for collaborating with me on this cutting edge exploration into addressing chronic conditions for ourselves personally, for those we serve. And I know without a doubt, with complete confidence, that our explorations, each one of us, and the themes we represent are the same themes as the larger collective, and that what we discover will benefit all of humanity, the entire world, in the throes of reeling from a collection of chronic conditions that could, in fact, destroy humanity. And I believe that I not only believe, I know that we are making an enormous contribution out of our sincere inquiry into the themes, and I have assembled the major themes, and they are indeed the themes of global healthcare. So let's begin with the somatic attunement. So with all somatic attunements, and that is in groups like this, groups you might lead, or in your own personal practice, please be mindful of your relationship to the earth. So the initiation of your own practice with energy medicine and the development of your consciousness, which I know that each one of you is committed to, bring in the earth on which you plant your feet, the mother that has been supporting you all along, and all the creatures, seen and unseen, your ancestors, all who are so ready to support you in moving past your own chronic conditions and being of service to others, which I know each one of you has in your heart, in your own way. So one way to do that is to put your awareness in the soles of your feet and out of that area that we explored yesterday with Nalini, that sacred site number 6. Is the root, the umbilical cord that unites you to the belly of the mother. It is there. And just as Nalini can't actually see the plantar fasciitis, it's there. And it is obstructing that root. As she said, when she tunes into it, she feels unstable. Of course she does. That root is trying to cut through that plantar fasciitis. So let's encourage that root to grow into the mother. That will align your structure. That site is also called the chiropractor for good reason. That's Mary's name for it, the chiropractor. The root, the umbilical cord between us and the earth aligns your spine. So put your awareness there in that root and extract it from wherever it might be hiding and direct it straight into the body of the mother. Soften all your joints. That's going to help this alignment. Just send a message, soften the joints. And let the breath of life support you. You may want to close your eyes. You may want to be in standing. This will also work seated. And let's return to sacred site number 26 outside the armpit. And you may hold one side or the other side or both sides simultaneously. It's totally up to you. But I want you to return to the core release process as you contact sacred site number 26. It's one of the sites that will benefit you from core release. We'll talk a little bit more about which sites might not be so wise to use in a core release. 26 is one of the key ones for core release, because when you do a core release, when you really activate this site, even though it is lateral on the body, it is speaking to the midline. It's also speaking to one of our major themes. So whether you are holding both simultaneously or one at a time, please explore in your own way, in your own time, and play with whether it's easier to do one side at a time or both together, depending on a variety of structural factors, but play with the core release on both sides. Note what might be different from yesterday. Letting your breath support you with the exhalation twice as long as the inhalation. I'm going to invite you, after you've released in this core way, the right and left 26, the site of completion, the site of total self-acceptance, I'm going to invite you to do some movement. If you like, you can turn off the audio so that you're free to sound as you move, to do some writing, to take 1 minute right now, one precious minute, to let your body sequence through all the limbs and the connective tissue everywhere this release. Thank you, everyone. And coming back to the collective, coming back to our shared radiant space, our evolutionary space. We're going to start with a brief check-in from everybody. 1 minute, Peter will time. Just where you're landing, what's on top. And to give you a sense of what's going to unfold following that, there's going to be some teaching, and then we're headed shortly in the direction of a demonstration, as I feel you will learn the most from that experiential. And I've pre-selected the names, of course. But we're going to proceed that with a review of the collective themes. I've posted some of this already on Mighty Networks so that you can read it there. And I will be adding to that because I have more along those lines. So starting with what's on top, 1 minute. Peter, since you're the timer, let's start with you, and then you can nominate someone.
Good morning, everybody. I'm actually feeling good, despite having had a migraine in between when I saw you last. And so that's 2 in 2 days, which isn't very fun. And I realized how much shame I have associated with migraines. There's so much shame. So that's good to identify, because I don't really want to be feeling shame about that. It has a big impact on me and my family. So there's like this whole theme of not being able to provide, or being a burden, or being sick, being a model of sickness. So I'm curious today. I'm curious just to hear what emerges, but I'm also curious to hear about certain themes which have been touched on, including sexual abuse, as I am a victim of sexual violence, and it feels related, because that's not many other places I feel shame. So that's a minute. It's nice to see you all again, of course, and I'm going to pass to Cheryl.
What an awesome discovery.
Oh, sorry.
Great. Oh, did you say Gerald or Cheryl?
I said Cheryl in my Kiwi accent.
I thought you said Cheryl. Gerald, are you feeling moved to go? You have your smile on.
I was feeling moved by the interaction. But I'm happy for you to go, and I get to take this in, so I'm cool with that.
I'll pass it to you next. How's that? I was just thinking, what an extraordinary discovery to make in the discomfort of your migraine. And I name that because I have so been working recently with in the Buddhist schema cosmology. They talk about this idea of the second arrow. Like, it's not what we experience, but what we do to ourselves because we have that experience. That's where the real suffering is. And I've really, because I have so much shame around, or have had so much shame around experiencing panic in the past, that's where I have really been doing the work with myself. So I just really relate to you there. And it was one of the things I was reflecting on last night, is where am I at in that journey with just softening, total self-acceptance, number 26s to my panic. That's what rises to the top for me. I really so appreciated reading the themes last night as I was falling to bed, like, you know, put into little streams. That's so helpful, that kind of organization and sorting. You know, because I'm thinking about myself, but I'm thinking about my son and my partner and my dad who's in the process of dying and all of the things. And so they all fall into those streams. And so it's so helpful. So that's what I have to say. And on to you, Gerald.
Thank you. Good afternoon and evening to everyone. Can you hear me okay?
And now, you spoke a bit louder.
Okay. I'm just at this, well, something's bubbling up just now about the midlines, and I guess to sum it up, what I'm experiencing is the meaning of the midlines sort of feeling new to me, in the sense of I had the ideas of what I got told a midline was, and then being able to like actually feel my midline in a different way today. And now I'm wondering about like, how do I listen from my midline? How do I speak from my midline? My cats have midlines, trees have midlines, like all these midlines, like, whoa, like my whole world is like blown up with midlines right now. And I'm just like, that's really cool. I've never had that before. And that's a little bit of where I'm landing this morning.
Nominating Siv. Thank you, Gerald.
Hi, everybody. I have been very tired today, and I have been thinking about a lot about my reservation to talk and to be myself and to speak out. So I have decided to, from now, I'm going to speak out and be myself. I can feel it that I am at the time I'm not comfortable about it, but I will do it. I've been talking a little bit with Stephanie, and yes, I'm now stepping up. So I have decided to go forward. Yeah. And the bleeding is about that I don't live my life like I want to do. I'm hiding and do some I'm doing things I don't like. So now I will start it with the thing I love and like, and I will use my vacation to set up things and get started.
Thank you, Siv. Would you like to nominate somebody with that brilliant voice of yours?
Yes, I would like to nominate Lydia. Lydie?
Lydie, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just landing from my dancing with the whole group. I didn't take a shower, but you can't feel that. And I didn't eat, so I will eat. I can't remember when, but if it was last night or this morning, but last night I felt something in between my shoulder blades, and it's still like there's awareness, very physical, just awareness about muscles and contractions that I didn't notice before, and I kind of see it as a new entrance point for releasing my chest. I'm not fully done with this exploration yet, and I can't explain how it works, but it's interesting to me. And I bought a thing that allows me to plug in my computer to do to the cable, so I'm here today fully.
Awesome. Yay, Letty. Welcome. Would you like to nominate somebody to go after you?
Yes, please, Sue.
I think it's Suzanne. She means Suzanne, and you're muted, Suzanne. There's Suzanne Keneally, and there's Susan Roberts.
Okay, Suzanne.
Suzanne.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Now you can hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, wonderful. So thank you, everybody. It was such a deep and rich experience yesterday. I'm so grateful for all the energy and all the knowledge. And so I was very, 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 very energized when we finished. and had a wonderful evening until I ate something unconsciously, right? Because I was having too much fun to take good care of myself or pay attention to what my food choice was. And so then I went into my typical old pattern of, I have gut pain. And then very quickly, I mean, I have that realization eventually, usually, but very, very quickly last night, I could hear the angels laughing their butts off. That, here you go. Did you want to work on this? Was this something that you were thinking about? And so I caught it very quickly. I think all to the credit of all the energy that was moving yesterday. And, just laid myself down and actually did the main central, because that's kind of where I go when I'm not sure what to do, or I don't want to think too much about what to do. I'll do that. And I was better in about 20, 25 minutes. And this is usually like a 4-hour shtick. So thank you all.
Thank you, Suzanne.
So who hasn't talked? Nalini.
Thank you. Gosh. So this was actually a long weekend for me. I had yesterday technically off from work. Our entire office was closed. And we get a lot of these, my company's amazing. We get a lot of mental health days. And I'm finding myself taking on way more than I should for that extra day. And I had so much planned to get done this weekend, and the anxiety, I think, really hit me last night and this morning. I normally am asleep by 9:30, 10 o'clock. I didn't sleep till about 1:30 last night. And my brother came over this morning to try and help me get some stuff done in the house. He's been so gracious helping me on the house so much. And there was this bird's nest that's over on the front veranda, has been there for a long time. I haven't seen any birds or on it for weeks, so I figure it's time to take it down. And unfortunately, he gets up there to take it down for me, and there were some wasps that had built a nest in there, and he got stung. And so there was a lot of guilt right now, because not only did he get hurt, which he's fine, but then I had to rush him out the door so I could get ready for class. So I'm just trying to get back to where I was at the end of class yesterday. And thank you all for the space to be able to do that. Is that everybody?
Thank you, Nalini. Just Susan Roberts.
Well, I was tired. I was tired at the thought of tonight's lecture, because I'm more of the early morning, not evening. So like a flower, my petals start shutting up. Anyhow, I also can do that with a mind thing. And so I just decided, well, I didn't want to be tired. And then I'm not tired. So that's quite handy. And then when we did that attunement, that was just very special, because I felt the energy go down my spine, but then I found that all my vertebrae had much more space, and they were softer, but stronger. And then there was this just opening in my chest, and it just felt lovely, actually. And I was just standing there, just really appreciating just that change. And when you mentioned shame, Peter, if I'd been going along a road and there was a signpost and it said shame, which is in a way what you did, my attention went to that. And shame has been a big part of what I've experienced. So just your signposting that was, yeah, interesting for me. Interesting doesn't really describe it. But yeah, there's a call there, let's put it that way. I think I feel more spacious, certainly more spacious than earlier today. And yeah, and I think you're all to be thanked for that. So thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you. Stephanie, would you like to check in?
Yeah, I think my check-in will just lead into the next section here. So first of all, I want to honor this whole group, just the beauty of the collective space that we created together, and just recognize how precious this is in the world. And even though we all would prefer to be in the same room and able to touch one another, the fact that we can be together in the evening in Norway, in the very early morning in Australia, in Aotearoa in Washington, Georgia, Colorado, Wales, France, and Oregon, and feel each other so much and support each other, not in any frivolous, airy-fairy way, but in a grounded and connected way, is a jewel. And I just want to acknowledge it, recognize it, and share it with those people who are attending by recording. I'm sure they will soak it up. Yes, Cheryl. Did you want to say something?
I was just remembering you were going to say the names of the people who were also on here, and I don't think we got them yesterday.
I can give you those names. So there's Jenny, your friend Jenny Miniere. I don't know if I said her last name right, who is a neighbor of Cheryl's. There's Tristan Oljan Street, who is a Tara approach practitioner and the one who introduced Nalini to this system. And she is actually currently in Washington. She was in Hawaii when Nalini was in Hawaii and I was in Hawaii at the same time, obviously. That's where Tristan studied with me. And the third person is Teresa Lynn, who is in Vancouver, Canada. And Teresa, some of you know her from other programs. She's been involved recently in multiple programs. So as of this moment, those are the ones I know. We're trying out a new registration system called Eventbrite that you've all been registering through. And so I don't get the registrations right in my inbox the way I used to. So if there are others, I don't know about them yet, but those are the ones I know about. So welcome, Teresa, Tristan, and Jenny. We are delighted to have you with us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl, for asking for that. Yeah, and that's exactly what I'd like to do now, is kind of get us started for this demonstration by hopefully knitting together some elements. And my check-in really is that I am deeply inspired by this material, by all of you, by the potential of what is in the Tara approach, the fusion of how I inhabit the material I absorbed from Mary, which miraculously I seem to have almost a photographic memory of. It's amazing what emerges out of my memory at exactly the right moment. And my investigations into the human nervous system, the potential of that for this suffering humanity and the health also of future generations is very clear to me, more clear than ever before. And the context of this class, Chronic Conditions, really activates all of that together. So let me ground here by creating some missing pieces so that things are more unified, and feel free to ask questions. So on a practical level, I want to speak about the core releases, because the core releases are new in terms of this kind of teaching. I have taught this before. I believe Gerald has been there when I've taught this before, and Peter has as well. But it's to a small group who I've been in person with. Not that you can really see what's happening in the core release. It's so subtle and so small, kind of like cranial releases. You can't really see them in the demonstration kind of way. But teaching it now to a larger group in this format has the purpose of accelerating the evolution of consciousness. So that's why the time has come to put this forward. I want to be clear that there really wasn't a massive discrepancy between what Mary did and what Mary taught. It was really a matter of those levels. So she was teaching people. Are you okay, Nalini? Can you hear me all right? Yeah. She was teaching people to treat at the level that would be effective. You know, everyone in this room is completely eligible for the core level of release. More people are now eligible for the core level of release than ever before, I believe. And you need to have discrimination to use the core releases. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So I think Mary was doing that. She was teaching at a level suitable for a larger collective of students at various levels of learning. But her actual practice was this core level of treatment, in my experience. She always treated me that way. So the core level of release is not going to be appropriate when there is inflammation in the body. I think that's a no-brainer, an obvious thing, but it's important to state it. If an area is inflamed, swollen, puffy, highly reddened, distended, bloated, don't do a core release there. Also, do not use core release. Yes, Peter?
Why not?
Because it will be too painful, it will not be beneficial, you won't be able to easily find the core of the point. There's too much interference with that inflamed quality. It's too tender.
And when you say inflammation, so many questions. When you say inflammation, do you mean anywhere in the body? So you've indicated migraines is an inflammation condition.
Right. Migraines are so interesting because they're both water element, 4th depth, and blood, 5th depth. And the inflammation is in the brain. So it's not inflammation that you would see on the outside. Of course, everybody knows that when we treat, we're following the pulses whenever that's possible. And we're going to focus on following on our own pulses here because at the moment, that's the only pulses we can read. So that would have the highest priority in terms of treatment. So you would know where to go. So it's possible that the pulse reading could lead you to another site where you could do a core release, even when somebody has inflammation in the brain.
So just to clarify, I think what you're saying is that we're kind of talking more about local inflammation.
Yes, that's correct.
Because a lot of us have a lot of systemic inflammation, but it's if there's local inflammation that we shouldn't treat.
Exactly. And there, by obvious extension, I believe, but I will state it now, do not treat a pregnant woman with the core releases, ever, at any time during the pregnancy. The core releases, just to be clear, the core releases are very stimulating. And when you're treating a pregnant woman, you're always treating 2 people. The woman is already overstimulated. She doesn't need another overstimulating invasion into her flesh. So with pregnancy, we treat quite gently. With old age, we also treat quite gently. And yes, Gerald.
I have a question, but now I'm so curious because you just said and then like was hanging on what was the next part. So
It's okay. I'll remember. Did you have a question?
oh, it's relating to inflammation.
Yes.
So with my ankle issue, I have a bit of like fluid retention and edema. Is it included
Don't
in?
use a core release on an area with edema.
Okay.
That's local inflammation. Yeah.
Okay.
There are certain sites that are really good to use core releases for that will help all chronic conditions. There are certain sites that are ripe for the courage it takes to resolve chronic conditions. It will take courage, Siv. Everyone, it takes courage. Courage. You understand that word, Siv? Courage. It takes courage to resolve chronic conditions because they're tied to deeply embedded patterns. That's why they're chronic. So there are some sites that will really help you juice up that courage. And these sites will benefit really beautifully from core releases. And those sites are 8, 16, 1, 26. Let me put those in order. 1. High 1 will work in both areas, medial and lateral. 1, high 1, 8, low 8, 16. Those are hot for core releases. They will move shit. And that's what needs to happen. 8 will literally move shit. These sites will help us on the sensory level, on the neurological level, on the emotional level, on the spiritual level, to find within our nervous systems, within our spirits, the courage to move past old patterns, which you can rely on the knowledge are always, sometimes more obviously than others, intergenerational. So Siv, what you're doing in committing to your voice, committing to coming forward is for you, is for your mother, is for your daughter, is for your daughter's children, is for your grandmother. You can be really sure of that. Some sites where you need to be a little more careful about whether or not you're going to do a core release. And some don't do a core release at all. For instance, 14. Don't do a core release on 14. That tissue there is just too vulnerable. 15 is a place where it can be very beneficial to do a core release, but your positioning is very sensitive. So 15 is the entire inguinal groin area. It's that whole range because there's 4 inches around every site. If you're actually right under the bone, a core release is very effective. But there are multiple veins and other tendons in that area that it could be disturbing to do a core release on. So it's that area right under the bone. The other place where you can do a 15 core release that's incredibly powerful and that's deeply related to the issue Peter raised about the role of sexual abuse in shaping chronic conditions is the pubic bone, the middle 15. This is actually a specific treatment from Mary for sexual abuse issues, shame being one of them, that she told me. There were a few other people present. Very few people heard this. I asked the question that elicited this answer, and the question was never asked again by anyone, but Mary spoke in that one moment about releasing the pubic bone using a core release for issues related to sexual abuse. Of course, it's very intimate and very tender, and likely done on yourself most effectively or someone you really trust if you feel that you would prefer to receive it. And the anchor for that core release would, of course, be the coccyx. So this is a good time to mention that sexual abuse at any time that it occurs, but especially early in life, but at any time, shapes sensory systems dramatically. So the way one views experiences through sensory reports, the world around them, other people, and themselves in relationship to that world is dramatically twerked by sexual abuse experience. Twerked would be twisted, Siv, distorted. So if someone did not experience early sexual abuse, let's say as a small child, as a young child, perhaps even earlier, if someone experienced sexual abuse, let's say as an adolescent or a young adult, it's likely there is a precursor to that. Not sexual abuse per se, but some constellation of family dynamics that made that individual vulnerable to sexual abuse. So that entire collection of sensory distortions is amplified by sexual abuse, which is always a shock. It's always the highest magnitude of trauma, which Gabor Mate now calls shock trauma. Being aware of that, I believe, is extremely valuable, and I think adds significantly to the understanding of what trauma-informed means. The number of people who have experienced sexual abuse is far greater than you think. And I speak of sexual abuse as, of course, the physical violation of sexual abuse, but beyond that, it's attitudes, intentions, projections, environments that are sexually violating. Living with someone who displays pornography or is self-revealing, or voyeurism, living with somebody when you're a young person who constantly walks in on you when you're in an intimate situation, getting dressed, going to the bathroom. I've worked with people who literally were spied upon by family members. They may never have been touched, but that was still sexual abuse. So that experience shapes so many things, but I'm speaking here on the physiological level. It shapes sensory systems. So it is of primary importance to be aware of that, because if sensory systems are distorted by such an invasion and remain unresolved, which happens a lot because people don't know that their sensory systems are distorted. If there's nobody in the environment who mirrors back to them that what they experienced was wrong and someone needs to be held accountable and they didn't deserve it and they're going to get help and that they are championed and validated and anything that can be done to help them recover from this horrible affliction, this invasion that they did not deserve or cause in any way. If nobody tells that individual all of that, the person has no way of knowing, because that's just part of their reality. They just think that's the way it is. The problem must be theirs, because they know there's something wrong with them, but they don't know what it is or why it is, and they will then try to hide it or cover it up. That leads to chronic conditions. So much more I could say about that. I feel quite, of course, my own history contributes enormously to this, and compassion for the others I've served. But that I think is enough for the moment. I think you get the idea. If that's in your history in any way whatsoever, then that is contributing to the chronic conditions you're dealing with in yourself. So I'm going to jump now very briefly, I hope, to some of these patterns. And I am going to put more into the Mighty Networks about this because it's cooking. It's alive. Yes,
Stephanie,
Cheryl.
Just a quick question about
Yes.
palpating the 15 under the bone. Are you talking about kind of getting underneath the pubic bone to either side? So I wanna make
Yes.
sure I'm going in the right direction. Yeah. okay.
Yes, you are. You are. You've got it. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you mean like going, if this was, where's the gentleman? Here he is. He's a pubic bone. Do you mean on this bottom side of the pubic bone under, or from the top under?
Oh, good question. From
Right.
the bottom to either side. Yes.
Oh, so pretty much along here.
Mhm.
No, so actually going to, like, go to the tip of the pubic bone on the bone, and then move over slightly to the right or the left, the right and the left. You want to treat both sides. Yes,
Uh-huh.
that's
And
it.
from above down, or from below up?
It's actually, as I experience it, it's from the side.
It's on the side. Yeah.
From the
From
side.
the side. Yes.
And there.
Yes.
Okay, so you're heading towards the
That's it.
midline.
You're going to start on the midline, the tip of the pubic bone. You're going to slide off to one side and go under that bone into the connective tissue
Mhm.
under that bone. Yep.
That way.
Yeah.
Okay.
And both
Thanks.
sides.
Mhm.
Both sides. So that's the treatment that Mary was talking about. It's a core release of the right and left sides of the pubic bone, anchoring with the coccyx. Now, let me add, because she added, you can also do that same core release to the right and left side of the coccyx as well.
Cool. Oh, wow. Huh.
So
And
in other words, let me back up here because it's all coming back to me right now. I'm remembering, and this is what happens when I remember these things, is I can see Mary, I can see the room. It's like a photographic memory. I don't have this for everything, but I have it for this. It's kind of, I'm getting goosebumps everywhere. It's quite amazing. It's like I'm there. I can see the lighting, I can see Mary, I can see what she was wearing. I can see myself, I can see the other people in the room. So you go to the tip of the pubic bone and you anchor with the coccyx. And you stay anchored, in other words, stable at the coccyx. as you do the core releases to the right and left sides of the pubic bone. And then you anchor in the pubic bone
Yes.
and do the core releases to the right and left sides of the coccyx. Yes, Gerald.
The short version of my question is the sphenoid related to the pubic bone in terms of cranial treatment?
Excellent question. The sphenoid is always going to be related to the entire pelvic structure.
Okay.
And this is a great question because let's say, do you know what the sphenoid is, Siv? Sphenoid is the roof of the mouth. It's like a
Okay.
winged bone in the roof of the mouth.
Mm.
So this is a great question, as always, from Gerald. If you're in a situation where you're treating someone else, or maybe even yourself, and it doesn't feel appropriate to do this very intimate release that I just described, you could do a sphenoid decompression with the intention that you're addressing this issue. So this is a great question, Gerald. Great opening here.
I have a question.
Yes.
Can you compare a cranial release and the kind of quality of touch to a functional release quality of touch?
Well, in the way that I teach cranial, which you have experienced, a few other people in the room have experienced, yes, there are times when we absolutely, in fact, the first exposure I had to functional release was in cranial. And then I correlated it with these core releases of Mary's. But I learned the functional term and the functional process from osteopath, a particular osteopath. And so I use the functional releases, particularly at the occiput, to open up the basal ganglia, the channel for the cranial nerves, and to open up the entire occipital ledge, particularly through the fours. I have never used, and don't know if I can say I don't recommend it, but it's never occurred to me to use a functional release on, let's say, the 20s or the 12s. But absolutely at the occiput with the fours, and also definitely on other structures in the cranium. You can use functional releases when it's appropriate, yes.
Is it okay to keep asking questions?
If I'm so going with the flow here that I definitely want to make the most of this opportunity, so yes.
You started outlining some not good candidates for core releases and some good candidates for core releases. Is that list full? So not good candidates was 14. Was there other kind of?
And 15 is to be evaluated, you know, and having that specific orientation that I just described, and factoring in always with 15 in any case, the sexual abuse components to that release. Now 13 is another one to just be very mindful about. I myself, have done incredibly powerful functional core releases of the middle 13. And I have found this, I say this for Liddy and others, but Liddy mentioned the respiratory issues. I have done that specifically for respiratory issues. A deep functional release of the middle 13. I'm not so sure, I've never been called to do that on the bilateral positions, but definitely the middle 13. And so there are other sites that potentially would lend themselves to core releases that I don't have a lot of experience with. I can absolutely validate the incredible potency of the sites I mentioned at the beginning, the 8, the 16, the low 8, the 1, the high 1, the 19 and the high 19 would also qualify. And these are all important, those that I just mentioned. 1, high 1, 8, low 8, 16, 26 also. These sites are important for midline strengthening. The midline, as Gerald is starting to flesh it out here. The midline, with strengthening the midline, is going to be incredibly valuable in all chronic conditions. And those sites that I just named are going to strengthen the midline. And you will see them in the midline flow that you have in your handbook. But if you don't want to follow the flow, you don't have the flow, you don't remember the flow, use those sites and just release them bilaterally with the core release in the appropriate situation. What's the appropriate situation? I'm going to invite you to use your incredible intuition and intelligence to know when to do it, or more importantly, when not to do it. Yes, Suzanne, you're muted.
Will you talk at some point about what you hear in the pulses that tells you whether it's appropriate to go for a core release or not? I mean, I also get an intuitive sense, and I trust that quite a bit, but I'd love to know if there's something that you're hearing.
Well, I think it's those qualities that I refer to quite often, which are embodiment being a major one, and resourced. Is the person resourced? And those two go together, embodiment and resourced. But I would say largely it's a highly intuitive decision, just as it is for you. It's really a sense of the moment, you know, and it's also an incredible trust in human resilience. So I want to say this one thing about resilience, and it's relevant, and I'll explain how it's relevant. This has to be articulated here. The heart, literally the heart of resilience, the secret to resilience is doing what you love. If you are doing what you love, you can get exhausted. You can overwork. I do all these things. And I test my pulses. You can overwork. You can get exhausted. You can eat the wrong things, or eat things that you shouldn't eat, or things you don't even want to eat. And you will still bounce back. So I want to talk about the theme of blood issues. So there are the blood issues that Siv mentioned, excessive vaginal bleeding. And then there are the blood issues associated with migraines. So the blood issues, and this translates to other themes as well, but the blood issues, using the cosmology of the Tara approach, are asking you, how are you using your life force? Blood is your life force. It's the fire element, of course. It's the 5th and the 6th depth. The 6th depth, primordial fire. And that's really the key one here. So that's the question with all blood-related issues. It's the dialogue Siv and I have been having. How are you using your life force? How do you want to use your life force? What is it that you pretend is stopping you from using your life force in the way that you really long to use it? What did you make up that was stopping you? And that alone, that question alone, to the right person at the right time, could change the progress of those chronic conditions. Change the progress, what does that mean? Does that mean the vaginal bleeding stops? Maybe. Maybe. But maybe it doesn't stop, maybe it lessens, maybe it gradually recedes. But the attitude toward it will shift. And that is bound to shift the symptoms, because where the mind goes, the body follows. Yes, Gerald.
So I've been hearing with different people a lot, kind of a pounding and thrusting pulse, or a flat, like a, and I related more the efforting side if it was relevant to the person in terms of fire element. And I'm wondering now about what you're saying with doing what you love. Does it seem to be, I heard a lot about what these people loved, and I didn't kind of notice how it was all tying in, and there was always something about how it wasn't happening, like there wasn't room for it. And so now I'm wondering,
Exactly. So that person is likely efforting to do something they don't love.
oh, right. Okay.
That's why they're efforting.
Okay. Yeah, thanks.
And now that Gerald and I are speaking, I want to say this other thing that is really important. As the practitioner, whether with other people or for yourself, one of your main services is asking a stimulating question. Gerald is so incredibly good at that. So your question, the question that you formulate, is as valuable as listening to pulses. And in this pandemic environment, it's what we've got. You know? So cultivate your capacity to ask stimulating, incisive questions, including of yourself, especially of yourself. That's as important as listening to pulses. And I try to give some examples in the material I posted on Mighty Networks, and I will add to that. Okay, I think that ties together a lot of loose ends. Are there any other questions? I'd like to move into the demonstration because I think we will learn a lot in that process. But I want to see if there are any other questions before we do that, or any other comments from anyone.
There was a question from Liddy.
Okay.
What does it mean you anchor with the coccyx? You put the other hand there gently?
Yes, literally, I use the word anchor the way I use it in cranial applications, which is you're not really treating, you're holding. And it might not be so gentle, it's more a presence. So it could be a strong presence. So it's like, in order for, and this translates again from cranial, in order for that movement to occur, there needs to be a fulcrum for it. There needs to be a place that it can move off of. And so by holding the coccyx, which is the seat of the adrenals, and the initiatory point for the information channeling up the spine, you're just there as a strong presence. And so I'm showing my palm because it would be my palm that I would anchor with. It wouldn't necessarily be a finger. It doesn't feel big enough, but you could do it whatever feels right for you. It doesn't matter that much. I'm not making a rule about it, but I would do it with the palm of my hand. And I was thinking a lot about the palm when I was talking about the core releases, because palming is also extremely powerful, but it's powerful in a different way. So the core releases are definitely getting stuff moving. They're kick your butt. They're not gentle. They're meant to say, come on, shit or get off the pot. You know, everything cannot always be gentle. Sorry. Everything cannot always be, you know, oh, you're wonderful. Everything's going to be fine. I love you so much. Everybody loves you. You're always loved. You know, see the twinkling stars, feel the sun. Bleh. You know, it's everything can't be that. That's not how the universe operates. Isn't that obvious? Look at what's happening. Are we or are we not getting our butt kicked?
Stephanie, when you talk about working on the core level, core releases is one way to work on the core level, right? There's other ways, like the rediscovery, for instance. Is that fit in the core category?
Yeah,
maybe the Rovers of Splendor.
Let's redefine core, because I think we're mixing up different understandings of core, and that's my fault because I haven't specified. So there's core releases, which we are now able to do, that are functional, that have to do with the way we contact an area. And then there is the core, as in the midline. So that's another understanding of core. So that's the main central vertical flow. That's the spinal column. That's the central channel. That's what we treat with the always powerful go-to, reliably, main central vertical flow, palm inju, and related treatments. 13 flow, for instance, will strengthen the midline. So that's a core of the body. And then there is the core level or the source level of treatment. It's 3 different uses of core. So it's important, I think, to differentiate them. So the source level of treatment would be treating at the causative level, and that could also be called the core level. And that's where the rediscovery would come in. Does that make sense?
It does. That's helpful. And as you're speaking, I'm just sort of thinking of other ways to treat at the core level. Like there's so many, right? If your orientation is to a causative issue, even mirroring can be treating, or cranial might even be treating at a causative level. So it's kind of like an orientation for treatment, which could involve a whole range of techniques.
That's correct. That's absolutely correct. Yeah. So it gets back to what we learned yesterday, which was having some clarity about what levels of treatment you are implementing, either for yourself or another person. And as I mentioned also yesterday, you could be treating at 2 levels at the same time, which could be the causative level and the organ function level. So the prenatal and the postnatal level simultaneously. So you could be resolving an early shock and simultaneously treating with Jinshin at a more structural level where that shock may have played out in the body. That happens a lot because many of the prenatal shocks include structural ramifications. And those play out as chronic conditions in the body. So here would be where you would find the low back problems, the back problems, of the intergenerational back problems, very likely related to prenatal positioning that is repeated due to structural similarities and epigenetic conditions. So we position prenatally in response to conditions outside of us And that affects our structure and even the quality of our connective tissue. Is this making sense? This is material for a longer exploration, but I think that overview gets you there. I'm just, Nalini, I'm just wondering, are you with us? Because
Yeah, I'm just taking notes on this other screen.
got it. Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, no,
So
I just
camera and your faces are here, but my notes and the manual are over here.
got it. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying. And I hope, Peter, that you're keeping track of the chat in case I'm missing anything
Yep.
there. Thank you so much. So question, do you want to take a break? I feel ready to go into a demonstration, but you may well need a break. This has been a big chunk. If you would like a break, thumbs up. Break. Can we do 5 minutes? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, 5-minute
Um,
break and then we'll do a demo. Okay, so let us begin the demonstration treatment with Suzanne Keneally, my dear friend and longtime supporter and champion and embodiment of the Tara approach. I met Suzanne in Colorado, where she still is. So you might want to change your view for this to be a speaker view so that, or a pin. Do you want to tell people how to pin, Peter?
Yep. So if you right click the camera, there's some options. Anyway, on my computer, that's how it works. Or you might use the 3 dots in the corner of the window where your person is, and you can add a pin or replace a pin. I can actually do that as well for everyone, but it's best if you learn to do this for yourself. So if it's not clear how to do that, then let me know. And Stephanie, it sounds like you're just going into this also, the orientation for us as viewers or watchers or witnesses or part of this.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah. Yeah, so if you pin Sue or you pin me, then you can see us as we do this exchange. And Peter can do that for all of us to make it easier. You could pin and unpin, but then you also want to have that skill for future classes because it's a great tool. And the others in the room are, of course, holding the space compassionately, lovingly, but attentively as well. So you are as present as I am in attuning to the seen and the unseen dimensions of this process. And through that profound witnessing that you do, you will feel drawn at times to ask questions or make suggestions or comments, and you are welcome to do that. I think, and Gerald emphasized this yesterday, others emphasized it today, this is a collective, energetic cauldron of healing for ourselves and for all of humanity. And all of the issues that we're dealing with are issues that the entire world is dealing with. The fire issue of doing what you love, not what you have to do, but what you love, is global. And many of Sue's issues are inflammatory ones. Inflammation is epidemic in the world. And as I mentioned on the Mighty Networks channel, inflammation is dependably, biochemically, neurohormonally tied to stress in every single case, without exception. So that is something you can count on. And the question of what do you want to say no to is quite relevant, though it may have a variety of permutations. And potentially we might find the origin of that theoretically in any rediscovery and perhaps in this one. So please hold the space with your full attention and be empowered to articulate what arises for you, what your guidance leads you to inquire about or to ask or suggest, engage. Okay, is that clear? Okay, so Peter, are you pinning us? How did we resolve that? We didn't.
Oh,
Yep, there we go. Thank you.
ah,
Yes,
I went to speaker view, but not much happened. So obviously this is
Yeah.
better. Mhm.
this is better. Yeah, exactly. And bye to Cheryl. We will miss her. All right, so Suzanne, you gave us a wonderful update already this morning. Anything you want to add to that, given the journey we've been on already together? Where are you right now?
Well, I think that I certainly know, and my dear friends would also say that, I've made significant progress on the workaholism, but I don't know that it ever goes away completely. And, you just said, Stephanie, how and when to say no. I also really appreciate the work of Eckhart Tolle, and he talks about a high quality no, not just the, no, I don't want to do that, but a no that arises from a place of balance or from a deeper place.
Beautiful, thank you for that. And when you say that no that arises, a high quality no, a no that arises from a deeper place, what do you feel in your body?
Yeah, so for me, certainly that's how you can tell where the no is coming from, right? Yeah. There's good resonance. That's what I would say. There's no muscle tension. There's no imbalance. It just, yeah, it soaks all the way through.
And have you ever experienced that no, a no like that soaks all the way through?
Oh, sure.
Great. So can you share a time when you
that, I'd like to always come from there, but
yeah. So can you describe whatever comes to mind, the moment that just readily, easily, you don't have to dig deep, that comes to mind when you had a no that was a quality no?
Oh, yes, probably pretty contemporary example. I had a colleague call with a difficult case and said, please, will you see this person? And the patient had COVID and recovered, went home, lived in a household where his partner also had COVID, recovered, but was still working in a nursing home setting. So this was pre-vaccination days, so 4 or 5 months ago. And so I thought about that, and just that was not right to expose myself, my psychometrist, my coworkers. And so that was where earlier on, I would have more heavily weighted the request from my esteemed colleague, right, to override perhaps my safety or my needs.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I'd like everybody to really take this in, the quality no. The quality no. When you've given a quality no or when you've waffled. And can you also remember a time when you've waffled or maybe actually didn't give a no at all, but wanted to give a no?
Oh yeah, I do that all the time.
Okay, so that's more common.
Yeah.
Yeah. So can you give an example, just anyone that comes to mind of when you didn't give a quality no, or perhaps no didn't even occur?
I also do a fair amount of forensic legal work. And those cases are certainly messy, often unpleasant. And unfortunately, my impression of our legal system at the present time is very adversarial. So I don't really enjoy that. But pays really well.
So you say yes to that when you'd rather say no?
I do, when I think, I need a couple of those a month to pay the bills or whatever, that kind of perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a great example, because I'm sure there are others present in the room, listening, and in the world who are really caught in that dilemma. And especially in times like this, which are financially stressed everywhere, people are often making choices. I know others in this room are making choices to do things they don't want to do because they think they have to because of the money. So I think this is a very common theme. So thank you for donating your theme to science for the benefit of humanity. I'd like you to tap into your body, Suzanne, and remember the last time you did that, the last time you said yes to a forensic case. It sounds to me, correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds to me like you don't want to do any of them. Is that correct? Or is that an exaggeration?
No, frankly, Stephanie, that's very good. I think I would do that. I have colleagues and friends who say, oh, well, you're the last bastion and you stand up for justice and for what's right, and you're doing the greater good. That doesn't resonate with me. I think I would just like to say, you people go off and resolve your issues somewhere else. Yeah, you're right.
Okay, so knowing that, I'd like you to recollect the last time this occurred and you said yes because you needed the money and you really wanted to say no, and just feel that in your body. We don't need to know any of the other details. We just really are interested in what your body sensation is.
Yeah, so things start to tighten up. Throat first, and then, kind of GI stuff. It's a tightening, tension.
So throat and GI, yeah. So stay with that. I know it's uncomfortable, but I know you're devoted to science. So, and it's temporary, and also it's a memory, right? Because
yes.
It's not actually happening. I am not going to ask you to do any forensic legal work. You can rest assured of that. So knowing that, I want you to stay with those tightening sensations in your throat and in your GI tract. Just stay with them. They may actually get more intense, but know that it's a process and this is not permanent. And as you stay with it and feel it, knowing it's a memory, I'd like you to also explore in a rather playful way, actually, in a curious way, how big or how old you feel with this tightening in your throat and in your GI system, in your digestive system, in your belly, in your GI tract, that whole connection between throat and GI tract. It starts in the throat, and then the next thing you mentioned is the GI tract. So everything in between, but those two are highlight areas, throat and GI tract. How big?
Yeah, that combined sensation is pretty old, pretty early.
Yeah. And just let that be playful about this. You say pretty early, and just playfully allow from the throat and GI tract, allow a general age range, time, or image. Doesn't have to actually be a specific age or time. It could just be a picture to come forward. And whatever comes forward, just name it. Don't try to figure it out, Suzanne.
Probably 4 to 5, I think.
Okay, okay. That's great. So can you see Suzanne at 4 to 5?
Yeah.
Yeah, and tell me about her. Describe her.
Pretty active, pretty inquisitive, spends a lot of time with adults.
What does she look like? What is her hair, her expression, her stature? What is she wearing?
A jumper in the American sense, not the British sense, like a little dress. And I had brown hair, probably about this length with bangs. Oh. Mhm.
And what's the expression on this little 4 or 5-year-old Suzanne's face with her brown hair and jumper, this inquisitive young woman who hangs out with adults?
Yeah, I think inquisitive is the facial expression.
Okay.
Sort of a little upturned, like, "Mhm." Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And when you see her, do you see her by yourself? Do you see her in a room with others? Do you see her outdoors or indoors?
The image I had right now was of walking outdoors with one of my beloved uncles.
Oh, okay. And just tell me a little about the relationship with this beloved uncle.
Let's see, he was my mother's only brother, and very, very much, my knight in shining armor would intervene, would sort of, take a bullet for me where my mother was concerned.
And what was his name?
Tom.
Tom. And is he still alive or no longer? Yeah. Yeah. Uncle Tom. And when you say he would take a bullet for you where your mother was concerned, why would he need to take a bullet for you where your mother was concerned?
Because she was a whole artillery bunker.
Okay. And could you just say a little bit more about that? Just
furious, vicious, angry, extremely emotionally abusive.
And Uncle Tom was the sanctuary in that gunfire.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Important resource for you. And I noticed that when I referred to this little 4 or 5-year-old, I referred to her as a young woman. And I wondered why I did that. And I wonder if at 4 or 5, this little girl was actually a young woman. And that's why I said that. And you're nodding. So
intuitive as always, Stephanie. Yeah, parentified child, you bet.
okay. All right. So let's zero in on this 4 or 5-year-old inquisitive, parentified child who is actually right now with Uncle Tom, going outside, leaving the artillery bunker with Uncle Tom. And she has presented herself at this moment when we're exploring the tightening in the throat and the GI tract in response to the question of yes or no, the things that pull you in different directions. When you know what your yes is and you know what your no is, and you say yes when you actually mean no. So that's the state that we're exploring. And this little one has shown up to give us some information, some reflection on this. We don't know what it is yet, but we're going to find out from her. And so I want you to find a part of you, Suzanne, that I know is, I would posit, a very strong part of you, which is the witness part of you. The part of you that has the capacity to see deeply. And this capacity is probably quite ancient in you. I would think it comes from your Irish lineage. It comes from just this feminine, intuitive line that you carry. But it's alive in you, it's alive in your parenting, it's alive in your practice. The capacity to see what is true in any situation. What is the real truth of what is occurring? And from that place, can you find that place? Yeah. So from that place in you, you're going to look at this other part of you, which is the 4 or 5-year-old little Suzanne, who is walking outside with her beloved Uncle Tom, away from the artillery bunker, which is her mother, and who is a parentified 4 or 5-year-old and incredibly inquisitive being. What does she need? That's what the witness is inquiring into with the wonderful vision of the witness. What does this 4 or 5-year-old Suzanne need?
Well, safety is the first thing that comes up.
Yeah, so she has her Uncle Tom, but she still needs safety. Yeah.
Or and then it sort of sounds a little bit like a safer place to be freer. Perhaps there's a sense of sort of the tightness is a shrinkage.
Yeah.
Does that make any
Yeah.
sense?
Yes.
Oh,
Absolutely.
Good. Okay. All right.
Absolutely, it does. Yes. So we're just stay. You're totally doing great. You're completely on the right track. I can see it from your expression. You're tuned into this little one's, your sensory system from this time. So even though she's walking away outdoors, beloved Uncle Tom is with her, there's a shrinkage, and she lives with that shrinkage.
Yeah. Yeah.
And safety in a deeper sense than just a moment of safety or just
a
Uncle
respite.
Tom.
Yeah. So
Just a respite, exactly. So the deeper sense of safety, how could she have a deeper sense of safety? What is needed for her to have a true sense of safety?
well, that's I'm not getting anything immediately, Stephanie.
That's okay. That's fine. That's fine. Just let the witness do that clear, calm, directed inquiry. There's no expectation of results, and see if anything comes up. And if nothing comes up, that's also fine. You're not performing here. This is not about giving the right answer at all. Not at all. It is really what arises up. We have many portals into this. Just be with that little one, that 4 or 5-year-old, this inquisitive little one who is parentified, who is already older than she deserves to be at this point, you know, who is having a little respite with beloved Uncle Tom, but she knows she has to go back in there. What does she really need?
It'd be nice if I could send her a message that says it gets better when you get older. Hang on, you know.
Yeah, she needs to know that there's hope, that at some point there will be no artillery bunker. She needs to know that. She's probably smart enough to already know that, I would guess.
Hmm.
I wonder if there's anything else that she needs.
Hmm.
So I want you to find another part of yourself that I also know is quite available to you. And that is the mother part of you, the one that has raised your boys, who I'm sure are doing incredibly well, and who are not in the house.
No, no more.
No more, no more. That nurturing, supportive, tuned in, feminine part of you, also deeply connected to that lineage of intuitive feminine history. And that part of you is going to actually show up there outside with the 4 or 5-year-old and Uncle Tom. And that part of you is actually going to give this little one what she needs, which may be so below the surface, so even unarticulated because it seems like an impossible dream. That mother part of you, that nurturing, feminine, intuitive, tuned in, you know, where mothers can see below the surface, just going to give that 4 or 5-year-old what she needs. Just let that, this is playful, Suzanne. Just let it unfurl before your very eyes and enjoy it. And when you're ready, let us know what happens.
Yeah, well, that makes it really easy. Thanks for that shift, Stephanie. She just needs love and physical affection from a mother.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That you're absolutely right on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, mother love, would we just call it that?
Mm-hmm.
And all that that encompasses.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So give that to her in this beautiful unfolding on an etheric level. The mother in you is giving this little one that physical affection, that mother love. And in giving her that mother love and empowering her through that mother love, see if there's any part of this 4 or 5-year-old that the mother part of you wants to affirm, wants to validate. Wants to articulate. There's the touch that's validating and empowering. There's the affection that says so much. But this little girl may need to hear something specific that will give her an even greater level of hope than just knowing this will soon be over at some point. Not
Well, as
immediately,
corny
but-
as this, yeah, as corny as this sounds, probably just you are completely okay as you are.
Yeah, and let me just share a little bit of what I'm hearing along with you, going into this process with you, and anybody else in the room might also be participating. But this is what I'm hearing is very much along these same lines. You know, this is this mother part of you, because you're so intelligent and not corny. You are anything but corny. you know, so whatever you say would be with meaning, not placating in any way at all or reassuring in any way at all, but more realistic, more true. I hear you saying, not only you are perfectly wonderful the way you are, but your anger at your mother, your not wanting to be with your mother, the no that you have for your mother is so healthy.
Ah.
It's so healthy for you to say no to your mother, and you have the right to say no. You're not dependent on her, because actually there's nothing to depend on except artillery. Is that accurate?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Mhm.
And to say no to that artillery, to say no to what should be nourishing, but isn't. The truth of the matter is it isn't. Saying no to that, good for you. You're going to be okay saying no to what you thought logically, organically should be a source of support, a source of nourishment. It's okay to say no to that, because there are other sources of nourishment. Look at Uncle Tom, look at the natural world. It's okay to say no to what you thought was a source of nourishment. And the mother in you can testify to that. Can you?
Yeah.
Can you? Can you say that to that child? That you can let go of the hope that your mother will finally give you the sustenance you need and just say, nope, not happening. Other sources are available, like Uncle Tom.
Mhm. Very true.
So I'd like you to tell her that. I'd like you to actually communicate that to her if that feels true to you. That she doesn't have to keep hoping, keep going back into that artillery bunker, hoping the shots won't be fired, because they're always going to be fired. She can just turn away, because that is an appropriate response.
Stephanie.
Yeah. I'm listening, Gerald. Yeah.
I'm not trying to interrupt the flow. Just noticing my 20 became really achy here.
Oh, your left 20. Yeah. Suzanne, why don't you try putting the palm of your hand on your left 20, you know, that area right above the eyebrow?
I'm sorry, was that for me?
Yes.
Oh.
Try, Gerald has a suggestion, palming the left 20. Yeah, perfect. And Gerald, do you have a sense of where her other hand might go?
Now I've stepped in it.
Okay.
Yes. Right, number 2. And it's funny I said the word stepped in it. Now I'm thinking about 2.
Okay, so left 20 and right 2. The 2 is on the iliac crest. You could palm both areas. And just stay with that for a moment. The left 20 genius is the name of that site. The right 2, the bowl of intuition, deeply feminine site. This 2 is a good site for all issues related to the feminine. Siv, this would be another good site for you in terms of your issue. It would you could hold the 2 and the 15 together would be a good treatment for you, Siv, or for anybody dealing with pelvic issues. But here we're connecting the pelvis, the bowl of intuition, the feminine intuitive force with genius. And how does that feel to the 4 or 5-year-old, Suzanne? How's she doing?
That's feels like a really good balance.
Mhm.
You know, I think that I'm more often, you know, intellectualizing rather than embodied.
Mm. Mm. Yeah,
This is a good fix for that.
absolutely, it is. Brilliant, Gerald. Yeah, very good. So this 4 or 5-year-old Suzanne is inquisitive and really smart, but she doesn't have a mother to anchor that intelligence in the feminine. And that's what we're giving her right now.
Mm.
So anchor this little girl. And I would now want to refer to her as a little girl so she can be a little girl. So she doesn't have to be a woman. She's not ready to be a woman. She's only 4 or 5. Anchor her in your feminine wisdom and tell her there are so many sources of support for her. She's free to say no to artillery bunkers. No little girl should have to say yes to gunfire. And just let her know that you've got her back. And when she needs to say no to gunfire, to stress and confrontation and altercation and adversarial energy, because it doesn't really suit her, nourish her, or it doesn't actually take care of her. She'll be fine because there's other sources. Does she believe that?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So how are you feeling right now, Suzanne?
Well, Gerald's a genius.
Yeah, I know that.
At that 22, that's a very good thing.
Yeah.
I'd love to take all the credit, but it feels like it, when Stephanie mentioned like the group stuff and we're in this atmosphere in the cauldron together, that's where it feels like it came from.
But this little girl's a genius also, Suzanne. She's a genius. She's very special. She's a survivor.
Mm.
And she knows what's true.
Yeah.
And she does not have to say yes when she really means no. It's hard to believe. And when you thought that's where the support was actually coming from, the artillery fire, you kept hoping it would come from the artillery fire. It never did. And it never will. There are many ways to pay bills.
Yeah.
Thank you. Does this feel okay to come to closure here?
Oh, beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, because this really speaks to so many of the issues that collectively we are holding for the world and that we can resolve. And Peter could maybe unpin as we move into the next segment. So if you've pinned or need to change the view, you can. How's everybody doing? So you let me know if we need another break in here. Let me let you know what I have in mind for the next installment. We have about 90 minutes left, is that correct? Yeah. So what I would like to do is send you into your breakout rooms. Some of you will be with the people you were with yesterday, and then Susan and Liddy will be together. And with this experience of going to the source level, as we did, you're gonna pose a stimulating question. That's the entire assignment really, is to pose a stimulating question. You may, excuse me, you may need some debrief before we do that. But that's where I'd like to go next, is that you go back into the breakout rooms with the idea of posing a stimulating question. You're not doing a session, you're just going to pose a stimulating question. So let's look at what the stimulating question was in Suzanne's case. It was the one that I suggested for all inflammatory conditions. This is one that Dr. Mate suggested for all inflammatory conditions. What do you want to say no to? What historically couldn't you say no to that you're continuing as if that old reality was the present reality when it's no longer the case? Does that make sense to everybody? I'd like to make some space here before we go into the breakout room so that we're sure about the process and see its value for resolving chronic conditions. Not meaning that the question resolves the chronic condition. It's not my job to resolve the chronic condition. It's to provide the ingredients that would allow Suzanne's own body to resolve the chronic condition. New information, bringing new information. That's what the stimulating question is. So the inquiry here was what did the 4 or 5-year-old who didn't really have the language or the understanding or the appropriate parenting, there was nobody around who could say to her, you know something, Suzanne, I've been watching all of this, and I want you to know that if you want to say no to your mother, you are so smart to say no to your mother, because she's not someone you ever want to say yes to. She doesn't have a yes in her. And maybe Uncle Tom said that with his being present to you, but it wasn't good enough because he wasn't there all the time. So that part of her needed to know that she had the power to say no to what looked like this should be a source of support here. This should be my nourishment. I have every right to expect this to be my nourishment. Surely it will be next time I go in there. And it never was. So you think, well, I'm going to give it one more chance. I'll say yes, even though I really want to say no. I'll say yes, because maybe this time it'll be really nourishing. Has anybody ever had that experience? It takes courage to end these patterns. You step into the unknown. That's where the whole world is right now. I'm looking out here in Portland and everybody is making the same old decision. They get a chance to be free and they start making the same old decisions. Buying more plastic, buying more stuff. So it takes courage to end the pattern. The courage comes from the question and the community that supports a new direction. I'd like to hear from you. How are you responding to this? This is Siv. Does this resonate with you? Does this make sense to you? What do you feel watching this process with Suzanne, Siv? You're muted. You need to unmute. Yeah.
Now it's people in the house, and they will laugh at me when I will speak English. So I will. Emma is home now, and I will just go another place before I speak. There is Emma.
Hi. Hi, Beauty. She speaks English so well. She speaks English perfectly.
Yes, she does.
She shouldn't. She's laughing at your English. That's not nice.
Okay. I just move.
It's so nice to hear your laugh, Siv.
Siv has a great laugh.
Okay. So now I'm in my bedroom. I think it was very, very interesting and inspiring to hear you question like you did, because there are so many things inside of Sue, and she have all the answer inside of her, and it was a genius to experience how the questions could bring bring it forward, or you know what I mean?
Yes.
So it was very, 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 very good.
Great. And is it similar to your struggle, Siv?
Yes, I have a big trouble with saying no, and this is very, very familiar with me. Yes.
Yeah.
And yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very good, Siv. You did great. Yeah. Others, comments? Peter, do you have some questions, comments, observations?
I'm processing a lot of thoughts and experiences I've had during this session. I really was feeling this headiness in the process until the 20 and 2 came, and Suzanne affirmed this tendency to be heady, like in the head, and that the bringing in the felt experience brought balance, and I was feeling this real headiness. And well, not intellectual, but you know, I observed, Suzanne, your eyes were open, which is unusual. I had not seen that really happen in a rediscovery kind of context, and that was interesting to me. That was still viable for you. It's quite fascinating, because a lot of people, to get to that space, have to shut out the environment they're in, close their eyes and go, inside, but this is available to you while your eyes were in the real world, the real world now. Like, and often people close their eyes to go into the memory world from my observation. And I myself am more like that in the rediscovery kind of context. So that was fascinating to me. And I got real teary when you said, I can't remember if it was you or Stephanie, but this little girl does not have to keep saying yes when she means no. So that really, even when I say it again, I get all goosebumpy, and I felt this flush in my sinuses and a real grief, almost a release of grief, but a grief that was mirrored in me through that. So it was very resonant and evocative. And educational. Thank you.
I will just say, Peter, in response to that, Stephanie is so amazing. To use the word witness with me, I know where that is. I use that and have for God knows how long. But that's why I didn't have to close my eyes and leave to make that contact, because I have some experience with staying with what's happening now in the room or with patients or whatever, and moving to that witness space to be able to do all that that provides, I guess.
I just before Gerald actually jumped in, I almost jumped in, but I held back because I thought it would be disruptive to the process. But I was really curious about what you were feeling when you were in that experience.
Peter, are you asking me or Jared?
You, Suzanne.
Oh, what I was feeling at a particular point?
Yeah, I was going to ask you at a particular point what you're feeling, but just I'm curious generally what your feeling state was like, if it was present to you, or like, I guess, emotional state. What was that like for you in that process?
So I think I was moving between being 4 or 5, having my personal current moment emotional response, which was pretty tough at a couple of junctures, and then being able to move in and out of that witness so that it could sort of keep moving. Does that make sense? Thanks for asking.
Thank you. It's great to hear.
Others want to share their experience, and also I want to make sure that you understand what you'll do when you're in the breakout rooms, because as we proceed, I'm hoping that you're seeing the crucial energetics of the questioning. Not that you need to worry, am I asking the right question or not? It's not that it's a right or wrong or better or worse question. The question will actually flow out of the energy of the situation. That's my experience. When I ask questions, I am, to the best of my ability, not in my head. I am not asking a question of analytical curiosity. I am asking a question of body-centered, indigenous, intuitive curiosity. It flows out of my body. And those questions can stimulate a breakthrough. So this was a question, it was the question that derives really from Gabor Mate's statement. Inflammatory conditions, so inflammatory conditions, neurobiologically, biochemically, are a direct response to stress. So the body produces too much cortisol, to put it as simple as possible. So cortisol, everybody's so praising cortisol because it's calming, but too much cortisol creates inflammation. It also creates this passive parasympathetic state. All, I would posit, all chronic conditions are parasympathetic states. So
Feels like a controversial statement.
it's a
Great.
it is a
Stimulus.
it is a controversial statement. It was a controversial statement to say that shock was different from trauma. Took like 20 years, 30 years for people to believe it because a man said it. A man who was an MD said it, so therefore it's got to be right. When I said it, it was not right.
That makes
Oh,
gorgeous intuitive sense, of course. That's why chronic conditions are chronic. That's why they don't move. They're parasympathetic. Ah!
Exactly. They're passive. They're static. Exactly.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And of them all, the one that is the most obvious with is inflammation, because you need an enormous amount of cortisol to maintain an inflammatory state for a chronic period of time. But that cortisol production is flowing out of a memory. It's not flowing out of present circumstances.
so then the repatterning of sympathetic parasympathetic dominance is a possible angle, right?
Yes, and one of the ways to repattern parasympathetic dominance, and that's, I think I say this on Mighty Networks, if not, I'll say it, is applies to all chronic conditions, is through expression, through communication, through positing these stimulating, the word stimulating is important. Stimulating questions. What are we stimulating? We're stimulating dopamine. We're stimulating the adrenal-based curiosity that will lead us into a new place. The answers, the problem is in the past, but the answers are in the future. The answers are in the unknown realm. You're going to go into a state that you haven't gone into before, and that's risky. What happens when you say no to the place you thought was your source of what we think of as nourishment or as a necessity, and I totally understandable and on a practical level true, money. Now, I've always gotten my money from doing this particular kind of thing that I hate. And I'm just done with, I'm tired of that. Siv, is that your situation?
Sure.
Just, Siv is a nurse, and that's where the money comes from, right, Siv? But that's not where your heart is. So very dangerous to think that what happens if I say no to that source of income? Now, there has to be a strategic thinking about it, but once you allow yourself to say no, and I say this from experience, surprising things happen that you don't expect. And because you're in an unknown territory, you're not in the familiar territory.
Stephanie, I just sent you a message, which is the instructions for the breakout room. Do you want to just check if I captured that accurately? And that'll go into the breakout rooms.
Thank you.
I don't know what timings you've got in mind for that, or if there's a
Susan
break
is,
in between.
okay. I'm sorry, I need to follow the, do I need to
That's
follow
fine.
this?
Uh,
I'll just
no.
read the breakout rooms and not everything else, right?
yeah, you don't need to read everything else.
Okay. Yes. Did you just copy this from what I sent you?
No, I wrote
Oh,
it as we spoke.
oh,
as you-
okay.
as
Because
you
it's
spoke.
in the notes that I sent you, but yeah, let me read that. And that's pretty close, but let me
Oh,
read
here we
the-
go.
Yeah.
I'll copy it into the chat here.
Yeah, I wrote it out, exactly what the breakout rooms intend to do. Oh, how do you feel about doing this? Does it make you nervous? I want to make sure everybody feels good about this experience. Haven't heard anything from Nalini, Susan, Liddy. Anything you want to say? Any questions you have about the breakout rooms? Debrief from the rediscovery. Nalini?
I think that maybe once, if we have those instructions, this might be clear, but I was a little unclear about exactly what to do. I know we're not doing a full rediscovery, but is it a matter of identifying what at least one of the chronic conditions in the other person, and then thinking of potential engaging questions to ask when doing that type of engagement with the person, if you were doing it? Is that the exercise?
I can make it a little more specific than that. That's a kind of global arena, but I could get into the center stage. So I will do that. And let me hear from the others to see if there's more that I can provide. Liddy, do you have some questions about the breakout room or feedback on the rediscovery, or questions about the rediscovery?
I don't have questions. I can say what resonated with me. Like I clearly get what it's like to have a bullet, blah blah blah, mother. Not a bullet, whatever, you get me, artillery and so on. But when it comes to say no to what I want to say no to, in my mind, there's a very strong voice that says, but I don't want to say no to my mother. And when you said it takes courage to end the pattern, what I hear is it takes courage to end the relationship, and I don't want to end the relationship. And when you said what happens if I say no to that source of income, it's about I say no to the relationship. So I'm there, and I'm happy to explore this with Susan.
Yeah, great. Yeah, and so just to be clear, I'm not saying say no to the relationship.
But that's what I hear in my mind.
Yeah.
It's my voice. It's
Yes.
not your voice.
Yes. I'll leave that to you and Susan to explore. And I will get back to Nalini's question. Susan, do you have any questions or comments?
I don't think I have any questions. I found the whole thing really interesting. I was interested in what I picked up from just the feeling, knowing thing. So that was interesting to see. I picked up things, and the no, it probably resonates with everyone, but I've got my own version of the no, and so that's interesting to look at my version. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So because I'm asking you in the breakout rooms to reference what you already know about the person's chronic condition, or one of the chronic conditions. So a start could be which of the chronic conditions that you were telling me about yesterday is uppermost for you right now. And I could do maybe a short demo here with Peter, because he's already told us that his migraines have been quite up for him. So the job of the listener is really just to tune in to what the person is telling them, and then just ask a question that flows out of that attuned curiosity. It doesn't have to be like the star question or the bingo question or the ace question. It's just, it could be a very small question. Like Gerald frequently, when we've been in treatment situations, will ask the question, at what time of day does this happen? That's a very simple question, but it always adds another dimension. I was asking Trez yesterday, and I commented on this in the Mighty Networks, where on her head, and is it always that same place on her head that she picks on? And I explained on the Mighty Networks why I asked that question. So it could be a very simple question like that. And the impact of the question is not only for you as the questioner to have increased empathy and understanding, it's also for the person you're asking to heighten their awareness of some aspect of what they're addressing.
So I've copied that thing from your program, Stephanie, into the general chat on the
Thank you.
process for in the breakout rooms. It says 30 minutes somewhere. What is the length of time for the breakout rooms? Is that right? 30 minutes?
Well, I was hoping that we would have a nice amount of time to explore this in a fluid way back and forth. And so I did allocate, I would say 20 minutes to 30 minutes. So let's say 25 minutes.
And does that include a swap?
Yes, absolutely.
So you'll get about 12 minutes each or something like that to be in the role of practitioner, and the other will be in the role of recipient. And
Correct.
The process is outlined there in the chat, which I'll copy again into the breakout rooms.
Does that sound okay? Would you like a little demo? Would that be helpful? No, don't need a demo. Great. Some people,
Okay.
somebody said it would be helpful.
Yes.
I said they're always helpful.
Okay, we can do it. Well, let's do a short one. Peter, is that okay with you?
Yep.
Because you've actually already done the part of describing the situation. Do you want to add anything to it in terms of the sequence of the migraines over the last couple days?
In restating my most dominant chronic issue, migraines. Yes. Anything to add? These early morning classes are distracting my sleep pattern, is what I realized. And there's great sadness in me around that. It's like, oh, this can't keep working. But disrupted sleep patterns has been a theme of this week. And I also have a migraine. Not right now, but when I get migraines, it's related.
To disrupted sleep patterns.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, and you said you feel sadness around disrupted sleep patterns. And I just wonder if disruptive sleep patterns are familiar to you, if there is a period in your life previously when you would have disruptive sleep patterns that you're aware of.
That's a good question. Yeah, I used to get growing pains, severe growing pains, and be waking up screaming and, you know, unbearable kind of pain that couldn't be soothed, even though I could be slightly soothed by a parent turning up, that the pain would not go away.
And what, a parent turning up, did that happen regularly when you had those pains, or was it dependable, or what would occur?
Yeah, I'd say they'd always turn up. There'd always be a time where I'd wonder where they are. And then eventually they would turn up.
And just curious about the feeling about that time when you wondered where they are, what you would feel during that time when you wondered where they are, and then how you felt when eventually they turned up.
Unfairness, like it's not very just that I'm here suffering this. The action I took actually was I reached out here and I grabbed something. And so I was taught, T-A-U-T. And when they eventually turned up, it's like, you know, fuck, you can't even do anything about it.
So that would be, those were my questions, and that would then be, you know, the task of the individual to then sort that out, see how they feel looking at that information. I mean, you could do a little of that in your breakouts, but it's not the job of the practitioner to be processing that situation. You're being supportive. You're being a witness, but you're not solving the riddle. You are providing the question. So Peter said, that's an interesting question, meaning that wasn't a question he had asked himself. That's your job. Ask a question that puts a new titration into the soup. You know, it could be a very simple question. So like, I once told a friend of mine, I was showing her these 2 photographs that I had found of myself when I was young, and I was showing them to her. I said, you know, it's funny, I don't know, these photographs suddenly turned up. I don't know where they were all this time. And I showed them to her and she said, well, what do you see in those 2 photographs about yourself? And my whole world changed just by her asking me that question. It was a very simple question, but it was a profound question. So do you have a sense?
Unattachedness is
Yeah.
a part of that practitioner role, right? Unattached, curious, self-regulated.
Yeah. How's this landing with everybody? Once again, I thought this was such a simple exercise, and I'm happy to make sure that it really lands with you, because I think it's important in resolving chronic conditions. That's why I've placed it here. So how are you all feeling about this? Good, good, yeah. Okay, anybody have any? I know Siv may be a little nervous because of the English. I know that's it's understandable, Siv. It's understandable. Who's in the room with Siv?
Hey,
Great, you have a great partner. She will help you, and you don't have to be worried about it. She's very intuitive, and she will help you. That's what we're here for, Siv.
Okay.
All right. Peter, send them to their rooms. And turn off the recording. Almost. Welcome back, everyone, from your juicy explorations. I wanted to go over the new flows, especially the back door to the heart, briefly, with a little more time for the back door to the heart because it's so relevant. And then I want to hear from each of you about your experience of finding the question. We won't be repeating the questions or debriefing the process, but I want to hear from each of you how finding the question was for you. Questions, very likely. So let's start with the midline flow. Everything that wasn't spontaneously downloaded in the last 24 hours is in your handbook. And I will add those spontaneous downloads as best I can to the Mighty Networks channel. But the handbook is comprehensive and it includes these new flows, and the midline flow includes references to core releases. So this midline flow is going to be especially helpful for some of the chronic conditions we've mentioned, like shame, imposter syndrome, and all of those conditions that are particularly in the spiritual and emotional realm of acting out of anything other than who you really are. All those personalities that are shaped by memory and shaped by minimizing who you truly are. So just to give you a hint of the relationship between question and midline, I mentioned showing these photos to a friend of mine, and she said, "What do you see in these two photos?" And these were photos of me from when I was like 4 and another one from when I was 10. And what I saw in the photos was a regal quality. I saw someone who was in the center of her own life. And that question brought me into my midline. So we spoke already of the value of 8. So holding high 19 with the same side 8 and doing a core release of the 8. I can't show that in these little boxes, but that would be just by itself incredibly helpful for someone cultivating the courage to move out of chronic conditions. Peter's giving us the value of the esteemed gentleman in those sites that are difficult to show on Zoom. Similarly, 26, which we have now released twice with the core release, with the same side 8. And if you like, you could continue down the 8 line with core release at every step on the 8 line from 8 to low 8. Might get a little uncomfortable, but it will be really valuable. It will be worth it. And you will find the difference between the core releases and just invasive touch, or high velocity touch, as they call it in some manual therapies, is that the discomfort fades quite rapidly. It's not prolonged. So it's a movement rather than a pain. And 26 with the same side and then with the opposite and then the same side high 1. All of this could be done with core releases. Super, super powerful. I created this in a self-care version. So now I'd like to talk briefly about the back door to the heart. So this is an antidote and a pathway, really, for so many of the chronic conditions that we've mentioned here, all the structural issues, plantar fasciitis, ALS, neck pain, all the leg syndromes, the pain in the feet, the restless leg, all of that is addressed by opening the back door to the heart, which is truly the release of the historical resentments and pent up rage and frustration that prevent your wings from spreading. Brilliant for a multiplicity of chronic conditions. And here you can use the core releases when they seem appropriate for you. You could, for instance, be doing something incredibly vibrant by doing a core release on the 19 and the same side 15 in the manner of core release on the 15 that I described to you. The kneecap and behind the knee positions here are palming placements. So you palm the kneecap, you palm behind the knee. This brings in the function of the bladder meridian in terms of opening the back door to the heart. This is also going to be very helpful for the bladder conditions, weak bladder. Weak bladder is going to be helped by both the midline and the back door to the heart flows. And then you could also do core releases on the 19 and 15 for greater vital transformation. So these two flows, as I've said before, are applicable to all chronic conditions, every single one of them, emotional, physical, spiritual. So beautiful. We have some time now for you to ask questions about these flows or anything in this course. I am super thrilled that we had this long time to explore asking stimulating questions. It's one of the most potent ways that we can be of service to others. And I will tell you that you can ask these questions of yourself. I do it all the time, and I get incredible mileage out of it. So I'd love to hear from each of you, particularly about your experience of finding the questions, and any feedback or comments. And I'd like to start with Nalini, and then you can nominate someone else.
Sure. So Gerald and I were in a room together. Let me just go back to my notes here really quickly. And where we ended up starting was because we were in the breakout room together yesterday, and we didn't get to Gerald's conditions yesterday. So I asked if that would be a good place to start today. And so Gerald did bring up some conditions, and I think one of which was not letting people in and not having needs. In other words, not expressing those conditions. And that's the one that he mentioned first, and definitely seemed to be the overarching, most dominant chronic condition.
So just to refresh from yesterday, I'm just having a deja vu from yesterday, in that the thing I asked from you was your experience of finding the question. And yesterday, Gerald made a request to not share the other person's conditions. So I just want to highlight this and see where we are now in terms of Gerald. How are you feeling about what's transpired?
This is a fun one for me. I think it's my earth element stuff, because I keep thinking, bloody hell, my name gets mentioned a lot. And I'm actually okay with it's in service. It feels like it's in service of the process of this group, so it's not in any way harmful to me for it to be known. I'm speaking for me. What other people want to do, they can do, but I'm okay for this.
Thank you for that generosity, Gerald. And just Nalini, so you know that Gerald has said it's fine, so you can proceed. But the question that I had asked was about the process of finding the question.
Right, but I had to identify what conditions first. I had none.
Right. Yes, I know. And and Gerald has said it's fine to share it, but just so others know, it's not necessary to share that. You can if you have permission from the other person, but that's not what I was asking about. We're happy to hear about it. Yeah.
Right, sure. So in identifying that, and the reason why I brought it up is because of the next bit that I'm trying to get to, is that we were unable to go forth with any of the questions I asked from there. So there was a good bit of resistance.
But Nalini, I'm so sorry. I don't mean to keep interrupting you, but what was your process in finding the questions for you? What was your experience?
Okay.
That's really what I'm curious about. Yeah.
So my experience was simply listening and exploring, what it could be. First of all, recognizing that there were two things that were said separately and connecting them and asking if there was a connection. So I recognized something that was kind of said at the beginning, and then maybe 3 or 4 list items later was mentioned another thing, and then just asking if those two things were possibly related. And the answer was yes to that. So then exploring that together so that it kind of broadened the scope of what was being talked about. So it wasn't just one being individual and another being individual. It was this broader thing to be talked about. And then exploring how they experience it and where they feel it. And then more specifically, when asked, what do you mean by that? Where do you feel it in your body?
Totally beautiful. So this is exactly what I'm looking for. So the process of feeling into what the questions are involves, and you've named it beautifully, one of the strategies you can use that will always work is listening for the themes, just as I was listening for the themes in the whole group in terms of what you were presenting. You listen for the themes, even though the person will often be speaking of disparate events. There's always going to be a link between all those events because they're all happening for the same person. So if you have difficulty saying no, and you have vaginal bleeding, and you have trouble with self-confidence, all of those are related. They're not three separate problems, but you need a witness to find that relationship. So that's exactly the first place, or one of the important primary places to put your presence and attention to is what, and you can just ask the question. You don't have to know what links things up. You can just see through your inquiries if the person can identify what links them up. And then of course, the question of where do you feel that in your body? When you say virtually anything, where do you feel that in your body is always dependably a great question. And then the questioner really is just totally present to the answers. And once this process begins, the next questions will unfold from it. Yeah, beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Nalini. And who?
Thank you, Gerald.
Gerald, perfect.
Stephanie, just a time observation. We have 8 minutes in our formal program, and curious if anyone needs to leave exactly on time or if we can spill over a bit. Does anyone need to leave on time? Correct.
Yeah,
Okay.
if you can give 5 more minutes, I think that might be enough. Yeah, great. Thank you. Gerald, your experience of finding the question.
My experience for me finding the question. It's definitely just words of these things that I feel inside. It's like you're mixing your finger in a whirlpool. Like it's an interaction. The question some weird way doesn't really come from me, and it's more than just the words, if that makes sense. That's the closest I can get to articulating something of that.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's an openness to being the vehicle of the questions. Yeah, it's an openness to being the vehicle of the questions. Beautiful. And if you're complete with that, that's gorgeous, but you may have more to say, which we are delighted to hear, or you can nominate the next person.
That's pretty good there. Lady, I'd like to nominate.
Yes, with Susan, we started from, she named something in her body quite precisely. So and she also had a hypothesis kind of thing about what it's connected.
Mm-hmm.
So I tried to, well, I started from there and I tried to go, like get more precisions about it, more descriptions. And also I wondered if she could describe it in a different way, like with texture or shape or anything, but there wasn't. But then I kept, like I picked the keywords and I kept asking questions around these keywords, and each time there would be a new keyword until she said that's the most precise thing, or even what's behind it, like the reason. And then I chose to explore another piece of it, but didn't get very far. And I think there's another, and actually we concluded by her saying she would do a rediscovery with herself on that particular theme. And also I think there's one thing that we haven't explored, and I can maybe write it to her. And other than that, I didn't give her any advice about sites or whatever. But at the end, when we were talking about that, I was holding my wrist, and I just told her that I spontaneously did that at that point, and so I just told her that that's how my body reacted to what we were sharing.
Gorgeous, gorgeous. And that you've given another key in terms of the questions. Notice the language the person uses, and notice particularly the repeated words and perhaps the descriptors. You can also correlate that with facial expressions and then inquire into that, what the correlation is. You know, for instance, in Sue's rediscovery, I questioned a little bit more into her relationship with her mom, because when Sue mentioned, Suzanne, I'm referring to, when she mentioned her mom, the look of disgust on her face was so obvious to me that I knew this was a very charged and important relationship in this process. So I ask more questions about that relationship. So you're following the person and trusting your observations and asking questions relative to their repeated words or their repeated expressions. Great. Anything more, Liddy? Great. Oh, it seems the natural progression here is to your partner. So, Susan.
Well, what happened with me is that Liddy stated what she wanted to look at, and I heard those words, but didn't pick them up, just had that as a context really, and then explored something that she'd mentioned to do with her body, and then also asked for some background. Because the background was going to, I knew, inform something. And so each question really came from the next question. And I felt like I was just feeling my way. And I wasn't worrying about the questions, because the next question just would come.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful.
And I used some of her phrases, which I repeated to her, as questions really, to suggest that. So I made a few suggestions, and she followed some of those, and yeah, just trying to think of anything else.
That's all gorgeous, and that's all characteristics of this process, because when you feel like the questions just make themselves, you're in the flow, you're there, and you always are going to be in good territory if you're actually using the person's words as a way to frame the questions and mirroring their words back to them. That is a really good practice, and you mirror it back with real interest in their choice of words. Like,
I mean, we did get to a phrase at the end, and as that just seeped through her whole expression changed. So she was softer looking, and yeah, just this great beauty was there in front of me.
Gorgeous, gorgeous. That's the living energy medicine of the questions. That's great. That's great. Well done. Well done. Beautiful. So now we have Siv and Suzanne. Let's start with Siv.
So Siva sent a message into the chat. I cannot speak now. I am in the living room with others. I have no battery on my computer. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right, then let's
You could-
go to Sue.
Oh, you could type a couple of things in if you want to share with your writing. So
Yeah,
as I was speaking, Suzanne.
that's great.
Do you want Suzanne to go while Liv might be typing?
Yes, I think that's a good idea.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So you
Um,
can take your time, Siv, and Suzanne will start.
Mhm. So because Stephanie had done such a beautiful job with me on my stuff, we felt real free to spend the time on Civ. You know, I felt very finished.
Hmm.
And I think that was also nice because it took some of the pressure off the language. We had a lot of time. If
Yeah.
she couldn't come up
Beautiful.
with a word she liked, we would play around with that. And, you know, I would say things like, well, is it blue or is it green or we're at turquoise or so I felt real free in the process and I thought that was nice. And,
Yeah.
you know, I would just support what Susan Roberts said was that it's a flow. It is certainly,
Mhm.
you know, just to listen and sort of weave in and out and around things.
Yeah.
And
How did it- Go ahead. Go ahead.
I had the sense that there wasn't just one question,
Right.
you know, that we would go a little ways down the path and then there would sort of be this pause and we'd both sort of take that in and then maybe pick it up on a different corner and go that way for a little bit. And I think we did 2 or 3 sort of little pieces or episodes like that. And
Yeah.
that was interesting.
Yeah. Beautiful. How luxurious. And how did that feel to you, Suzanne, as the questioner? How did that feel, that process?
It was very natural and it didn't feel like work. You know, it felt really organic. That's what I'll say.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, this is very much a quality that I want to bring forward in the Tara approach. And for those of you who saw the Wisdom of Trauma film or this talks, you could see how Gabor Mate has really living into that easy questioning and that relaxed questioning as opposed to those who want to appear more professional and expert authorities. He never tries to do that. And that's, I feel, one of his greatest contributions, whereas virtually all the others have a stance of, I'm the expert here. And that's not the truth, actually. The expert is always the recipient. Yeah. So Siv, do you want to write something in the chat to share your experience of being the questioner? And this is what I really want to convey, is that this is actually quite a delightful process. I love it. I truly love it. It is the richest relational exchanges that is possible for us to have in so many regards.
So Sivraj, I didn't ask any questions, so there's no debrief from me about that experience of that.
But how did you feel in the entire process?
I felt safe and I experienced many things about myself, new things about myself, new things. I felt safe and I experienced new things about myself.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, thank you, everyone. I'm going to turn it over to my wizard friend, Peter, for the closure.
Thank you, Stephanie. Before we close, I've just popped into the chat the things that are coming up next. One is a relatively new initiative of mine, which is the Tara Community Cafe. And the aim of the cafe is to generate an informal space for us to hang out and carry on this kind of space we're in. People who are studying Tara and all the courses that Stephanie has run are welcome to come, and we just make it up what we do. Sometimes we share flows, sometimes we ask questions, sometimes we just enjoy hanging out. And it's very informal, and it's a donation-based thing. And there's alternating times. So there's 5 times that it'll happen, 1 each month. Some of the times are good for the US, and some of the times are good for Europe, and some of the times are good for Brazil. And so find your time. And there's a foundations course that Stephanie and I are running in July, mid-July.
We just moved that up by 1 hour at Peter's request, so it's going to start an hour later than previously promoted.
Voice my truth. And then there's the Voice Your Truth free workshop, and then a series of 4 workshops, which it sounds really, really good. It's a collaboration with Claire Hegden.
Hadeen.
Hadeen, thank you. Anyway, so those are some ways you can carry on doing this stuff. And there's a Mighty Networks channel, which is really rich. It gets richer the more you engage with it. It's like one of these questioning processes, is like it flows organically from one thing to the next. So even if you just put a smiley face in there, it will give back to you even more. So in closure, invite you to share a word, a couple of words, maybe a sentence about what this experience has been like for you, where to from here, or how you're feeling, something that sums up your experience of being together. And then we'll finish. So does that sound all right, Stephanie?
Yeah, and we'll collect from you any interest in continuing in the pursuit of the chronic conditions topic specifically. Yeah.
Along those lines, it would be really cool, because these are long-term things we're dealing with, to hear, even if it's in a couple of months, something comes through to you, chuck it on the network. We'll still be open and we'll still get notified. So any progress you have in your chronic conditions would be happily heard about by everyone, because we're on this path for healing these chronic conditions.
And this might generate the next iteration of this course as well. Yeah.
Which will be responsive to what you share.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to share my word is a very rich roller coaster. That's what I feel like it's been for me. Yesterday was like this, and today's like that. And I nominate Susan to go next.
Gratefully enthused.
Pass the nomination on, Susan.
I nominate Liddy.
New eyes.
Did you say that again?
eyes.
New eyes.
Eyes.
Excuse me.
And I nominate. See. No, she can't speak, but she can type the word.
Siv.
She says, have been outside my comfort zone big time. Siv, who do you want to nominate? Suzanne.
So I would say I'm profoundly grateful to all of you, and I feel very shifted.
Mm.
Thank you, Suzanne. Who would you like to nominate to go next?
Nalini?
So reignition's still there from yesterday, but I have my angel card. I pull an angel card every Sunday. So today's the last day for this angel card for this past week, and it's simplicity. And we'll go with Peter. How about you?
Well, I've got roller coaster, but I'll pass on to Gerald.
Upheaval.
What'd you say?
I'll try. I'll make my Australian accent a little less, so it's more of hearable. Upheaval.
Upheaval.
Upheaval, upheaval. Okay.
Hmm. Do you have a word, Stephanie?
I am liberated. I'm liberated. Yeah.
So I would encourage everybody to do some integration flows after these 2 days would be really beneficial, but you know, follow your own wisdom in that as well. Perhaps the midline flow, the new self-care, or the core releases, who knows, but it's well worth putting in a bit of time to support yourself to process the experience.
Wonderful to be with all
Nalini's
of
got a
you.
date with self-care tonight.
Midline and back door to the heart. Great date.
Okay, that brings us to closure.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Peter,
Thanks,
if you want to stay on
bye-bye.
for just a flash, well, yeah.
See you soon.